Welcome to CO2 Coffee with ICOS. I'm Werner Kutsch. I'm the director of ICOS, and we want to overcome these times of confinement and meet virtually in a cafe to chat about topics that are related to climate change. We want to talk about the consumer's choices and how can they impact our personal carbon footprint and how they can, of course, influence in general the CO2 emissions. I want to welcome our guests who are today Elena Scaccia from Siena. She's active there in Fridays for Future, but currently she is at Lisbon. And the second guest is Lucia Perugini from the Euro-Mediterranean Center for Climate Change in Viterbo in Italy. So welcome, Elena, and welcome, Lucia.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
So the tradition in this cafe is that we first learn a little bit about our guests. So Elena, you are active in Fridays for Future in Siena. How did you connect to Fridays for Future?
Basically, I wanted to meet other people who have the same topic to save the planet. And I searched on the internet and I found that there was the first global strike, the 15th of March 2019. And after this, quickly researched, I found a group in Siena. And this is also my city, so I decided to join them. And basically, we met for the first global strike. And then after that, we continued to meet each other to find other ways to involve other people. And after that, we also create a sort of family that is involved in the same topic.
But now you are in Portugal, I've heard, for an internship. How is the situation in Portugal?
Well, now Lisbon is the Green Capital of Europe 2020. So this year, yes, it's like my year. And here is depend because sometimes you can find a lot of places where the people very interested in recycling. Sometimes people are very focused, and in other kind of ways, we understood that we have a lot of street to do.
You are studying in political science, I've heard. So what's your plan for the future? Will your work in the future be connected, for example, to the climate change topic?
Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to change the world. So basically, I don't know now exactly what I would like to do, but I wanted to study political science because I think we have to have the science part, scientific part, but also the political part. So someone has to do the other part of the job. And that's why I wanted to be informed and I want to learn as much as I can, so I will know where to act.
Lucia, you are in this round, the science part today, and how did you come to climate science?
I actually had the same, tried to make the same path as Elena, because my starting study was actually political science. But then I moved to forestry science, and then I went in many countries for forestry project and carbon sequestration projects in India, Ukraine, and Albania, and everywhere in the world, nearly South Africa and China. And then now I'm more in the science and in the interface between science and policy. So I'm back to policy, Elena. Although I was lost in the forest, but I'm still in the forest actually. And also supporting the ministry and for the environment, the inventory, the greenhouse gas inventory in agricultural sector.
So, yeah, thank you very much for this introduction. We are coming now to the topic of the day, which is consumers' choices. So, Elena, what's your first question on that?
My first question is, how much can our personal consumption choices affect the climate change? And also, what can individuals do to reduce emissions caused by their daily activity?
Thank you, Elena. Indeed, I mean, I would like to start from far, I would say, from a broader picture, because in order to make a choice, you need to know where emissions are coming from. In the global perspective, the main source of emission is the electricity and heat production, with the 25% of the share of the global emissions, followed by the agriculture, forest, and other land uses, which is the 24% of the global emissions, then followed by industry. In this overall global picture, transportation is just, 14% of the global emissions. But if we look at the European share, so we go, from the global perspective into the European scenario, transportation has a higher share of the total emission of the EU, with the 24%, while agriculture is less, although it's still nearly 10% of the total emissions, is less than in the global picture. Why? Because here in Europe, we don't have strong deforestation patterns. Actually, our forests actually are growing. So knowing how this share and where you live and what are your behavior, then you can detect what are the main sectors and where you can make the major impact of your consumption choices.
Thanks a lot, Lucia. This was something I was always thinking about, that if you have a look at one single product, you cannot put it into one of the emission sectors. So there is a lot of emissions coming from different sectors when it's related to a product. And this makes the choice very, very difficult. But we are now coming to the second question, which is about food.
Yeah, I would like to ask, what can I do as an individual to decrease my footprint? For example, what doing choices about my food?
Again, food it's a very important sector, let's say, or a component of our daily life, where we can really make the difference in our global carbon footprint. Looking at where do the emissions are coming from our food supply chain, we can see that the major emissions are coming from the animal-based food, so beef mainly, and then also lamb and cheese, dairy in general. This food has a very high consumption of land in terms of pastures that are used, but also land that is used to produce the feed stock for those animals. Also, the emissions linked to the enteric fermentation of the cows, for example, they emit a lot of methane in the atmosphere, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. But if we look at the transportation and packaging, the share of emissions is actually very small. It's around from 0.5% of the per kilo of products impact of CO2 emissions up to 10%. So normally it's commonly thought that buying in the food markets next to your home actually has an impact. Indeed, has an impact on the local economy. Sustainable food, organic food has an impact on the general environmental impact on biodiversity, pollution. But regarding CO2, then the impact is less important. And beef, for example, emits 60 times CO2 more than any other vegetable, and also cheese is very important. And then there is another component that I really would like to share with you. It's related to the food loss and waste. The loss comes, the origin of the losses is all the food that is lost from the harvesting, from the fields up to the distribution. And then from the consumption side, which is actually, we are the most contributors of that, is the food waste, what we throw away. And this is has been estimated to be up to 10% of the emissions are actually attributable to the food waste. And the food waste has increased by 30% since 60s. So a lot, 30% of the food produced in the world is lost or wasted. And this has an impact also on the consumption, on deforestation, on the land that is occupied by agriculture that actually could be actually used for other uses or covered by forest. Putting all this together, our dietary choices have an impact on the overall, and it has also a mitigation potential. The IPCC, in its special report that has been published last year on land and climate change, has put together the impact of several, the mitigation impacts and potentials of several diets. So going from the Mediterranean choices with moderate meat consumption but rich in vegetables, it has a potential of mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions up to 3 gigatons of CO2 per year, which is a lot, up to the vegan choices, which are more extreme, but still the most virtuous in terms of climate-friendly diets, that's up to 8 gigatons of CO2 per year. So we do have a lot of potential there, and mainly it's the most impacting choice we can have is to reduce our consumption of red meat and dairy.
Thank you very much. I've learned a lot now. What's about you, Elena? How is your diet?
Since I started to live alone, it's easier for me because I buy my own food, and I'm not vegetarian, and even vegan, but I'm trying to reduce the meat. And it's there are like 3 or 4 months that I started to eat meat, general meat, just once per week. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes not, but I'm trying. It's important.
I'm trying to summarize in a very simple formula. Lucia, you have to say whether I'm right, but could we agree on 4 general rules? First, vegetable is better than meat. Fresh is better than processed. Regional is better than transported from far away. And the 4th one is buy only as much as you can eat and don't throw away food.
Exactly. I just wanted to add one single piece. Fresh meat, you say, the fresh foods. The only case where transportation really matters when food is transported by air. Flights emit 50 times more than ship transportation. So fresh food with very short shelf life coming from abroad, a long distance, have a very high transportation impact. This is the only case where transportation really matters.
Elena, you had a question about transportation as well?
Yeah, of course, because transportation is usually considered to be one of the most important source of carbons. And also I would like to know how we can reduce our transportation footprint.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Elena. So, Lucia, what's your opinion about transportation?
indeed, any action that make us avoiding the use of fossil fuel, it's an important step towards the reduction of atmospheric CO2. So biking and using public transportation, walking are indeed very good choices. Many have also started to think about electric cars. In that case, then it highly depends where you are, because indeed you have to use the electricity that are produced, and how this electricity is produced is highly important. So when the power source is coming from coal, basically your electric car would go fueled by coal itself, so having an embedded CO2 emission very high. So it's extremely important how the energy sector is done.
We have learned in the last days that there might be a lot of money available for a so-called green recovery, or the European Green Deal. And coming back to the electrical cars, this means that a charging infrastructure should come along with increased regenerative power production, right?
Yes, exactly.
And perhaps green electricity, charging electrical cars might be a very good investment into the future of Europe, because it's also, of course, increasing the air quality in the cities. Elena, now you have a fourth question. And
I have a sort of question that can resume all we say, and what we can do to make a real change.
Any choices matter. Indeed, as we said, we need to work on our food choices, and as a consumers we can really make the difference. Also impacting abroad deforestation in the tropical areas, and indeed we can also reduce our transportation, but at the very end of the story, as we said, 80% of our emissions are coming from fuel combustions, and this is mainly used for energy production. And for that, we as a consumer can do very little. And it really needs, as Werner was saying, very low carbon transition that involves all the system, the energy system, and it's hard to do it as a single person. And this we can do it actually through our country and through our politicians and through our voting the politicians that actually advocate for this kind of low carbon transition. And this is extremely important, and here it's extremely important the role of the Friday for Future or Extinction Rebellion or any other movement that really make a real pressure on the public opinion, on the politicians to really go for a sustainable future and low carbon future.
So, Elena, did you get the message that once the streets are open again, we need Fridays for Future back on the streets?
Yeah, of course. And we also need to understand that we have to know why we do some kind of choices. So it's very important to always think of what we do, even if for transportation, for food, for everything. So yeah, thank you so much for all this explanation, because they really helped.
So thank you very much again. And just to inform you, there will be a chat during this live presentation, and there will also be the possibility to communicate about this video further on YouTube, but also you can use the ICOS Twitter channel or the ICOS Instagram channel. Thanks again, and we are happy for every response on this video. Cheers.